This is Sam Long.
I'm John Nugent.
And I am Ron Peters.
Welcome to the After Class Podcast.
Because the best conversations happen
After class.
Thanks for joining us. Another episode of the After Class Podcast. We're glad to have you along. This episode, we want to begin with a question that we've asked you as listeners to send in. If you want to know more about us and things, we could start our episodes. Adrian has sent us many questions, and we're almost out of her questions. So I'll just say, if you have something, hey, send it our way. We can incorporate. We'll even name you by name.
That's right.
Maybe.
At least your first name.
At least your first name.
My first name, exactly. So we don't butcher your last name.
So so if you have a question, send it to us via the Facebooks or the emails or Pigeon, whatever you want to send it, and that's fine. So today's question from Adrian is, if you had a walk-up song, what would it be? And, of course, if you don't know what we're talking about, when the sports these days, especially in baseball, as the player is walking to the plate, they play their song. They play it every time they go to the plate,
right.
Which is fun. It's like about 5 seconds long maybe. But they get to choose. The players get to choose what song is played. And so if you were to choose, what would it be?
All right. This was a hard question for me because what am I walking up to?
I don't know. Life.
I always think about pitchers, right? Like
Right,
walking up
yeah.
to the mound, like Enter the Sandman from Mariano Rivera. What's the context of us having a walk-up song?
I have
So-
no idea.
so
I think
let's-
it's open.
So let's say you've been invited to be a speaker. You're
Oh, that's gonna be-
you're the plenary speaker
That
at a
will not be
conference.
what I
That's, no. I love this idea of having a walk-up song for that because nobody does it. And so I want to have a walk-up song.
that probably changes what I would choose then.
It doesn't change mine at all.
It would change mine as well.
Because I thought about our DC3 used to have a kickball team,
Uh-huh.
and like we thought about having walk-up songs for the kickball, doing the same sort of thing.
Yep.
That's what my song would have been,
And that's fine if
that
you
would
want to
change
use
for
it.
the other one. I
But I
suppose.
mean, you pick your thing that you want to walk up to. It's not like we have to walk up to a scholarly thing or whatever. If you want to walk up to the kickball or baseball, or
So you
whatever.
can say how you interpreted it and then what it is.
Sure.
Do you
Should I
want to go
start?
first? Sure.
I interpret it in the sporty way, like you're walking up to some sort of sporting thing, and so I would have picked "The Man" by the Killers. It's just, especially the chorus. Obviously, it just talks about how he's the man, and that would I would want to sort of put that in the minds of the opponents that I'm about to walk up, and you better bring your A game because I'm going to knock it out of the park or whatever it might be.
And so is it all about the lyrics, like
Yes.
the lyrics of that song? I don't know if I'm familiar with that song.
Can you say some of the lyrics of
I don't.
the chorus?
I mean, the chorus is just like he's the man, like just talks about that. That's it. That's really the
Okay,
chorus.
repeats that.
It's not very complicated, but
Okay.
and it's got a great guitar riff and great beat to it.
Here's the
so
man, fear what he can do with the
something
foot
like that. Yes,
in kickball.
Ozymandias, if you will.
All right.
Yeah, there's so many good songs that I could choose from. I mean, it's like when I think about what's going to be my walk-up song, whether it's sporting or whatever, it's like, man, how do I choose? Because there are so many that I like, and it's almost like I'd have to change it every week because I'd have to rotate through all of them. It's kind of a boring choice, but it's because it's just so good. But Wherever I May Roam by Metallica, it just drives so great. The guitar in it and the music. You don't even have to get into the lyrics of it. Just get that, pounding, in your face kind of a song to get into their heads. And then you get up there, and call your shot or whatever. And I think that if I was going to have a walk-up song at a conference, I'd play the same thing. Just get them in that mindset, But it gets in the head of your opponent, but it riles up in a good way the people who are on your team. It's like, yeah, go, man, and like the crowd starts cheering and all that kind of stuff. I want the song to do that. And musically, I guess that would be my choice.
All right. So I protesteth having
too
a walk-up
much.
song to like speak before an audience because I mean the context in which I'm doing that is I'm like bringing the word of God
Right.
or I'm like trying to teach about Jesus or the kingdom, and so the notion that I have a walk-up song that draws attention to me when I'm trying to draw attention to Jesus, that was just paralyzing for me. Like, so I had to be like, all right, it can't be that context.
All right. I feel differently,
And-
but I understand.
And then athletically, I'm pretty much out of that realm because of my bad back. So I try to think of like what would be like a theme song that helps motivate me right? And like conveys how I feel when I step up to the plate of life. And there are two songs. They're very popular. They're played a lot at different games. I couldn't really choose between them. And they don't really show bravado.
None,
So they're
take,
not
none
really-
taken.
They're not going to cast fear into my enemy. But I think Don't Stop Believing, right?
Oh, Journey,
because
yep.
I just feel like in this world, it's faced a lot of challenges, right? Our college has faced a lot of challenge, and we just keep fighting, and we don't give up. And finally, we're in a season where we're seeing God's blessing. But for the last 20 years, it's felt like fighting, don't give up, right? And I feel that way in other aspects of my life, but also, living out of prayer, like that's yeah, that just don't stop believing. Living on a prayer, here by God's grace, we're going to keep fighting. We're not going to give up. And so there's that fight spirit in it.
Yeah.
But it probably presumes that a posture not of victory and confidence, but a realization that this has been tough and I'm not giving up yet.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, those are the ones that kind of inspire me.
My wife would love that because you just listed her two favorite bands, Journey and Bon Jovi. And so she would absolutely love you for that. Well, there are others, like another one that came to my mind that I wouldn't use because it's not driving enough. But one of my favorite guitar riffs is by an 80s band called Accept. It was a song called Balls to the Wall. And the riff is so good, but it's a little bit too slow. It drives, it builds,
Yeah.
but it doesn't quite, get the crowd going. Like you said, it would be paralyzing. It's not about me. I'm not trying to draw attention to me. I'm trying to get everybody just pumped,
About me being there.
No, about the message that they're going to hear, not about me, but there's a great message and let's get excited about it. And so I want to get everybody pumped up for that.
It is the context. Like you're thinking of a gracious audience. There could be an antagonistic audience where what Ron
Right,
said.
that's why I said it's not going to inspire fear.
Right.
He said, "Yeah, this guy is living on a prayer." But like maybe the battle belongs to the Lord. Maybe there's a different kind of way of framing this. Like it's not me fighting you; it's God. So
Yeah, you're wrong. Take it up with God, dorks.
Your problem's not with me today.
yeah.
So.
but it was a hard question. But thanks, Adrian, for making us think and struggle through it a little bit.
I think it's a fun question because we all like music a lot.
Yes,
And
we do.
So, like, yeah.
And I wonder if at a later episode we might want to just come and go, you know what? I've changed my mind.
Oh, sure.
I thought that I was going to be this one, but now that I thought about it, here's the song that if I had to walk up, this is the song I want playing.
Yeah, I might be able to do better if I sat down and went through my music collection. But,
Yes.
all right.
Yeah, like
Something better might pop up.
What you're saying made me think of a couple of songs that are particularly sentimental to me and got me through like periods. And this is a song that like epitomizes that period in my life. So
Well, and context makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Are you trying to create, a different mood? Different songs will create different moods.
Oh, yeah.
And so you can't always say it's always going to be the same song. So there you go, Adrian. You created a bigger conundrum than we realized even before we hit record
she expected a
today.
simple answer, like, "Hey, basically, what's your favorite song?" Like, nope, we can't do that because we're
We're
too critically
theologians.
minded. Yes.
This is what we do.
Invest way too much thought on this question.
Speaking of way too much thought, just kidding. So we're continuing our series on 1 Peter. We got through all of 2 verses last time. We expect to do more this time.
Yeah,
but of course, we're also setting the stage for the book and what will come after. And so we're going to pick it up starting in chapter 1, verse 3. I guess it's me who will be reading.
You always go first, Sam.
I'll be reading 3 through 9. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ. By his great mercy, he has given us a new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, and into an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you, who are being protected by the power of God through faith for a salvation ready to be revealed in the last time. In this you rejoice, even if now for a little while you have had to suffer various trials, so that the genuineness of your faith, being more precious than gold that though perishable is tested by fire, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. Although you have not seen him, you love him. And even though you do not see him now, you believe in him and rejoice with an indescribable and glorious joy. For you are receiving the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. Before we get too far into it, let me just say this. Based on what we talked about last time about Peter not necessarily having the grammatical acumen to
yeah.
write this, like verse 6, 7. It's just like on and on. It's like classic Paul, which is like it goes on forever. Right. It just seems like a really long verse that's thrown together. So anyway.
Well, and again, I don't want to get into the tall weeds of the Greek, but this is where some of that elegance comes in, like in Greek, because he does something that you don't really see in the New Testament of like using grammar to nest certain statements.
Yeah.
And I love like writing it up on the board and drawing lines and showing them like, do you see how this word connects with this word? And yeah, like I said, if you don't know Greek, then it doesn't mean anything to you. But I just think it's really cool.
Yeah, and the translation tries to do like M dashes, like doing parts of speech, these different like little phrases. But it's long, and you got to stop. Like, what's he talking about here? What goes with what? And where diagramming does actually help, though people hate diagramming. It actually helps to understand and unpack the verse and what he's trying to accomplish.
Yeah, and I do a diagramming light. I don't do classic diagramming.
Not a full-on George Brown diagramming.
No, I don't do that. This is kind of cool, though. We didn't do this intentionally, but in a way it connects with our intro here because John, in a way, this is like his intro song because he starts out just really positive. He's talking about, our salvation and our hope, just kind of looking at the big theme before we break it down.
I mean, Peter?
Did I say John?
Yeah, in sabbatical land.
Yeah, I'm thinking all about my book. I'm living in John's world. So thank you for
I don't know if he was referencing you, John.
Right, yeah. I was saying, are you talking about me? No, you're not talking about me.
No, the Apostle John.
I was
you're
like,
right.
are you going to talk about Journey? What's going on?
But, the walk-on song, it's supposed to hype you up and put fear in your enemies and all that kind of stuff. But Peter starts out on this high note. Just like getting them thinking, the reason that we're in this is because we're looking forward to what God is going to do, the culmination of all of God's work that our salvation is driving toward. And he's going to talk about suffering. Suffering is a big topic in the book of 1 Peter. And for a lot of people, like, why is it worth it? Why should I suffer? This seems like it's pretty lousy. I can make better decisions. And so he starts off by putting right there in front of them the salvation that our God is bringing them, giving them that sense of hope to say it is worth it. All the things we're going to talk about and we're going to break down, it's all worth it because what God is bringing all of this towards is going to be so great for us. And you don't want to miss out on it. Don't be like the rest of the world is going to be, left behind. Not in the eschatological sense. That's not what I meant.
Tim Lay.
So the rapture's coming. That's what I'm getting out of this.
Yeah, that's not what I meant. Don't be like the world's going to miss out on this, but be happy that you're a part of the end game here.
Yeah, I feel like this passage really does a great job of setting the stage for the rest of the letter. So, and this is kind of normal in New Testament letters and probably Greco-Roman letters of the time.
Yeah, without a doubt.
You kind of forecast your theme very early on after introducing yourself and identifying your audience. And I feel like, last time we spent quite a bit of time talking about the possible meaning of exiles here. And what does it mean for them to be exiles? And I think he here kind of frames it positively, but in tension, right? That he acknowledges our exile, like why we are here in this boat together is because we have been reborn. We have new birth into a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus and into an inheritance, right? That's kept in heaven for you. And so we have this living hope through Jesus. This is what sets us apart. This is who we are. We didn't choose to be different from the rest of the culture because they're so evil and we just have to stand against them. It's not because, there was a scattering and by no choice of our own, we've been flung apart to the, uttermost parts of the empire. We've been reborn in Jesus into this living hope. And that should frame our mindset. And that our inheritance is kept in heaven for us, imperishable, unable to be attacked, unable to suffer loss or persecution, and then acknowledging that it's important for us to remind this because we are in a time of suffering. Like we are facing challenges, and he does anticipate this theme of suffering, like Ron said, it's going to permeate the letter, but the framing for why we're suffering and the context of our suffering seems to be our exilic status, which is foisted upon us by our conversion into Jesus Christ.
Yeah, when you make that choice to enter God's kingdom, it now puts you at odds with the world, right? And you cause your own exile, so to speak. And it's but that and it's important to say, like, that's the choice you are making, right? And that's what I love about this book and other parts where it makes it clear. There's so much today when it talks about conversion. It's like, just believe in Jesus and he'll make your life better. Like, no, I mean, yes, but like, you're, by choosing Jesus, by choosing allegiance to God's kingdom, it's going to cause conflict and problems. And Peter's going to dance between both sides. Like, it's great. I know there's some crappy part, but it's great, and he's going to go this back and forth that he even does in this chapter or in this section. Just reminds us that, like, yeah, like, there's a inexpressible blessing, but it comes with difficult times. But it's worth it, is really what he's going to be saying. It's worth it.
Yeah, I feel like there are three different ways you can frame this exile. And the one is from a posture of victimhood. This awful thing happened to me, and now I'm just suffering because this thing that shouldn't have happened. Woe is me, God. How could you let this happen to me? Kind of thing. Like, lamenting about, the tragedy of your circumstance, right? Another way is kind of the opposite, is I've left you. I'm above you. I'm better than you. I think about the people who intentionally left the United States when Trump became president.
Right.
We are forcing ourselves into exile because we're above and better than what you are, right? And there's a sense in which, in the first century, Christians who find themselves in tension with the wider world and feeling like they don't belong can play the victim, or they can play the superiority card.
That elitist attitude, yeah.
Yeah, and those are two, I think, faulty ways of thinking about our exilic nature as Christians, either as victims or as we're better than them. And this was pointed out to me, not necessarily this little typology, but how to read First Peter as a whole by an article by Miroslav Volf. He wrote an article called Soft Difference, and it develops the theme of exile in First Peter. It used to just be a free-floating article, but in a journal, but now it's in a collection of essays called Captive to the Word of God. It's a great essay. If you just want to get into the mind space of Peter and understand the way he's approaching the issues of this letter, soft difference. We're different from the world, but it's not a harsh difference of antagonism or of victimhood, but it's we're different from you, but not because we're better, right? Anything that's in us, but it's because God has given us new birth through Jesus, and we now are in this living hope, which is something the rest of the world doesn't have. And it's not their fault they don't have it. They need us to step up to the plate and be witnesses to this hope we have that they could have too. So there's a difference between us and the world, but it's not something we can boast about of our doing. It's not one we should celebrate how different we are than you. It's no, we were you.
Yeah.
We've been reborn because we once were where you are. And we've seen this hope in Jesus Christ, and we've embraced it, and it's made us different. And we want that for you too. So there's this difference from the world, but it's this hopeful difference, not an antagonism.
Yeah. Something else is moving on. I don't want to divert the conversation.
Good word, John.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Moving on.
No, the idea of this idea of the new birth. He's given us new birth. Might be the right translation, but I have reasons to think that might be different than that, because the Greek word is anagenesis. The word ana there, that prefix, means actually down from. And maybe my saying John earlier was not totally wrong, because in some ways it connects it to John's gospel, because John makes a big point of this from above. In fact, there's even a great wordplay in John 3 when it says you have to be born again, but could really be translated you have to be born from above, which is more consistent with a repeating theme that you see throughout his letter. And so this idea of anagenesis, which even lexicons will say new birth, but I'm wondering if they're kind of succumbing to, well, this is how we got to translate it, because from above, it just sounds confusing. But being born from God, for John, that was a really big deal. Not natural birth, i.e., you got to be descended from Abraham or whatever, but rather begotten from God. And so it's actually consistent with a theme that we see in other places in the New Testament. that your birth, your human birth came from your mom and dad, but you've gone through a birth that comes from God, that the Holy Spirit plays a part in and all that. And so, a lot of people, their birth determines their family of origin and their nationality and all that. And he's saying this new birth is part, or this birth from above, I should say, is what puts you into God's kingdom. Why do we call him Father? Because we have been begotten from above. And so it's just a very interesting way of thinking how that plays into Christian identity and how John is building a case for being exiles. Of course you're an exile. You're not even really born from this world. You're born from above, from the Father.
So a more literal translation would be a from above birth.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the alternative, as opposed to being born from below, like, so in distinction from our natural birth,
Yeah.
from our mom, right?
Yep.
Or in contrast to being born of the things that animate this world order.
Yeah, it's a very otherworldly way of looking at it. That on the one hand, we're still occupying the bodies that we live in. We're going to, as long as we have souls, the breath of life, or whatever. But we also recognize that we're looking forward to something that ties into God's plan for his creation, this idea of renewal. And that's what Paul gets into, even like in 1 Corinthians 15. He's like, mortal flesh cannot occupy the new creation. That's a big part of the argument that he makes there. And I think that Peter is saying a similar kind of a thing, that this being begotten from above is necessary to get us into the place to be ready for God's ultimate plan of renewal and resurrection. And so it's an important way of thinking about yourself. It's like, yep, you're different. You're walking down the street and people can't see it. This is really a weird way of saying it. I don't mean it's literally true. Don't think, but it's almost like you have this sort of glow, like an aura about you that says you're begetting from God, from above, transforms you into a different person that has begun now. It's the now and not yet. Transforms you now, but we'll see its fullness, at the resurrection.
Yeah. Why do you suppose that our rebirth from above is tied directly to the resurrection of Jesus? Right. It's some people can think about it as your rebirth tied to his dying on the cross for you, right, and his blood covering all your sins. Why does he go to the resurrection?
I think that in part, again, it's going back to the now and not yet. Like Jesus has literally died and rose from the dead. Baptism obviously symbolizes that. You go under the water, you come out. Part of the symbolism is death and resurrection. And death and resurrection is dying to this world. To say, in many ways, I've died to this world, I've died to that old person. I'm still the same Ron that I was, but at the same time, I'm not the same Ron that I was. And it anticipates, on the one hand, that we are different people now. We've died and risen from the dead, but also saying, in a more literal sense, we will die and rise from the dead. And so I think it captures the now and not yet of the gospel message. That on the one hand, you're dying to that old person. You're dying to all the things that the world would say make you who you are, and rising in the things that God says this is who you are. And so I know I'm a different person now, and I know I will be a different person at some point in the future.
Yep. New birth doesn't make sense when it's paired with dying, right? They're opposites.
Yep. Yeah.
But resurrection, that's what we're talking about. And so, like, you can't see resurrection without death, and you can't see death without the resurrection, right? And so they're seen together, but they're seemingly two different things. The death is to, like you're saying, to this world, to those things, but I'm moving towards something else. It's not just denying one thing. I'm moving forward, and the new birth and all those sorts of things. And so the pairing with resurrection just makes logical, thematic sense, because unfortunately, a lot of churches are stuck on the dying part, right? Sure. And they're missing out on the whole new birth aspect of it. And so I think it's good that you brought that up and said, like, well, why is it this? Because, like, we're not about flogging ourselves over and over again. We're moving on, right, to this new life that God has in store for us.
Well, and I think a lot of Gentiles they struggle with the idea of resurrection. They probably saw it as like a reincarnation or something like that. It's like, no. We think about that radically different. I think that's why Paul dealt with the stuff he dealt with in 1 Corinthians 15. In the book I'm working on, I think that's part of the reason John is writing some of the things he writes. is that Gentiles are like, well, no, we want to go on to the Elysian fields or whatever. We want to escape this mortal body and become disembodied spirits. I mean, Paul even talks about that in 2 Corinthians. Like, we don't want to be disembodied. We want to be re-embodied. And so trying to reshape this idea. And so being birthed from above, I think also taps into that idea of a Christian view of resurrection that the Gentiles struggled to wrap their heads around.
Yeah, I don't think I can add much to what you guys have said. But I think it is important because our time of exile, our time of suffering that he's going to get to, we shouldn't think of it as this is our dying. This is our experiencing the cross like Jesus experienced the cross. Peter's just not framing his argument from that standpoint. There may be a time and place for that. He wants them to frame their exilic suffering in light of, Jesus conquered death and now lives ascended on high. He broke the barrier between death and new life, and we have been invited to participate in that new resurrection life. And if you want to participate in that new resurrection life, you're going to experience things in this world because of your positive witness to the resurrection, because of the change in how you walk as one from above. That's going to beget stuff like this. And it's a participation in the victory of Christ.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so cool.
Yeah.
I think. So.
Great. Do you want to talk about that inheritance kept in heaven business?
Absolutely.
On to verse 4.
Because this is a passage that does get misread. We've been reborn into an inheritance that is imperishable, undefiled, and unfading, kept in heaven for you.
Right.
And how is that often read? Or how is that perhaps
so one
misread?
one way of reading would be it's kept in heaven and we will receive it when we die and go to heaven. Right? And that God's waiting there for us at the finish line, and we go through the pearly gates and he hands us this inheritance that could won't perish, spoil, or fade. That's one way of reading it.
And that's a very Greek way of thinking about it. Yeah, like you're going to die and go to heaven someday. That's just like taking a Greek view of death and layering that onto, a Christian view of what happens after we die.
Yeah. If you're a longtime listener of this podcast, of the series about, what happens when you die, we know that we don't hold that view.
Right.
And so it must mean something else.
Well, and I mean, he's already made resurrection a big part of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we're looking forward to is not going to heaven someday. We're looking forward to resurrection life. But the question is, what's being guarded? What is it that's being guarded for us? So I know you're looking at me like, okay, Ron, you're going to answer the question, but
not necessarily.
I was going to say,
waiting in line.
I was going to say, John, I think
It's
you
your
have
turn.
something. It's almost like you've got something you're ready to share there.
Yeah. I'm just thinking
wanna
that
make
this
that
verse
space.
is just, it's saying what it's saying. Our inheritance
Mm-hmm.
is in heaven. And the purpose of it being there is so that what it's being there for this paragraph, for this part of the argument, means no one can touch it.
Okay, that's
Like,
exactly
the
yes.
people who you are dealing with, who are causing suffering, the people who, the negative side of exile that you're experiencing, they might touch your body. They can hurt you. They can take things away from you. They can, take your house. They could, take away your standing in society. They can mock you. They can't touch this inheritance that you've received through Jesus Christ. That is in heaven. It is untouchable. It is imperishable. It never fades away. Like, it's locked up and secure. You can't lose that from the perspective of they can't take that away from you.
Right, exactly.
If you want to forfeit it, that's another thing, right? If you want to deny the Father, whatever.
You ruined it. I was going to ask if you were once saved, always saved guy. And you clarified.
You
Man,
took it
I
away.
got your moment. Lost.
But I mean, just if you were to read this the most literally, like, our inheritance, like, all of us have parents, right? And when they pass, if we're still alive, there's an inheritance they have for us.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't necessarily like if my parents had, an inheritance of money saved in a retirement account, and I'm going to get 1/4 of it, right, as one of 4 kids. That's kept in a maybe safety deposit box in a bank or whatever. I don't have to go into the safety deposit box to enjoy my inheritance.
Right. And only there.
Right. It's from there. It's kept there in a safe place, and it's going to be released from there, where I will experience the inheritance somewhere else, probably in Lansing, right? You don't necessarily go into the safety deposit box or the bank vault to enjoy your inheritance. So just the notion that this is kind of a proof text for, see, when you die, you go to heaven because that's where your inheritance is. Oh, yeah, like, when your parents die, you go into the bank because that's where your inheritance is, and that's where you live out your inherited life.
Yeah. I think you hit the key point is that it's about reassuring these people that despite what they encounter, it can't be taken away. Like, it's there and it's protected. And so, like, live in confidence, right? Live in faith that no matter what happens, this is there for you. It's not about where and when and how it happens. It's reassuring them that this is a fact, that this inheritance is from God and, like, they said can't be taken by anyone else.
Yeah.
Be lost by us.
You can't touch this. That could be another
walk-on
song. You can't touch this.
Touch this. I'm gonna read First Peter.
If you were a boxer, that would be a good walk-up song.
That would be.
You can't touch this.
Or monk.
Or a monk.
I stand by it.
I'm not disagreeing
Or
with you.
germaphobe. I mean, really, there's a lot of possibilities.
Yeah.
But one thing is, like, he still builds on that, like, going into the next verse, because he also says, who are being protected by the power of God. And so, God stored up our inheritance, but, you're being protected by God too. Now, that doesn't mean that you're not going to suffer, but nobody can separate you from that inheritance. You are being protected by God. And so, as you've already said, sure, you can say, I don't want it anymore and walk away. That's your choice. But from God's perspective, he's like, no, I'm going to protect your inheritance and I'm going to protect you. And so there's some confidence there that we can say, you know what? You can't take my inheritance away and you can't separate me from it, because the creator of heaven and earth is watching over that in me. And why would I want to deny it? I'm so looking forward to this inheritance. Why would I want to deny it, deny my God, and turn my back on it? And so it's just that encouraging word to keep them focused. Keep your eyes on the prize. It's going to be a tough walk here. I'm not saying that it's going to be easy, but it's just so worth it.
Yeah. And it goes on to say, I'm protected by the power of God through faith for salvation. And a salvation to be revealed in the last time. But, here we see that, we all often think of Paul as kind of the good news, saved by grace through faith.
Oh, right, yeah.
And now this is shared. We have this language in James. We have this language in Peter. They all believe we are saved by grace through faith.
Yeah.
And this is a gift. It's from God. He's the one who did it. He gave you rebirth from above. Like, God is the source of our hope, our faith, our stability in times of suffering. No one can touch that, and it's all his gift. There's very little here about the agency of Christians to deserve this. It just presumes grace. Our response, this is really the first time we get to our kind of response. Well, it's by faith. Like, we believe, we trust the God who has made the promise, who has raised Jesus, who has said that he will raise us, and who has affirmed that indeed our resurrection life has already begun, in a sense, as we identify with Christ's resurrection. So I think that's important about just kind of the structure of his thought. Is not far off from the Apostle Paul in thinking about those terms. What do you think about ready to be revealed in the last time?
The salvation that's ready to be revealed. Yeah, it's interesting because, like, I don't want to jump ahead, but verse 9 kind of says not the same thing about salvation. About it's like now and like kind of ongoing, whereas this is talking about it'll happen at the end.
Yeah, you are receiving the outcome of your faith, the salvation of your souls. So we are receiving
in the process of receiving it,
but it's
right?
to be revealed in the last time.
Right. And so it's kind of this weird, like, I don't know, seems contradictory on some level.
Well, it's funny because a lot of Christians will say, when did you get saved?
Right.
And I'm not saying that's totally wrong, but at the same time, the salvation that the Bible talks about is frequently in the future, that God is going to redeem and renew the earth, and we get to be participants in it, that we get to occupy the renewed the creation. Again, that's what Paul's talking about in 1 Corinthians 15. And so there's a sense in which our salvation, I'm not saying it doesn't begin now, but really the hope of our salvation is renewal and resurrection and all that. And so we're looking forward to salvation. We're on the path to it, and we're a part of that group that's going to experience it, but we haven't experienced it yet. And so there's a hopeful anticipation that plays a part in keeping us on the right path.
Yeah, if you were to ask like the question, how does the Bible talk about when did we get saved? You have to say, well, what verse are you talking about? Because some verses, like when we were saved, is when God, before the creation of the world, decided that he's going to save this world through his son Jesus. Like that's when our salvation was born, so to speak, right? And then we could say, well, when did you get saved? Well, when God sent Jesus into the world and he broke down the barrier between us and God through the cross, like that's our salvation. Or when did you get saved? Like, well, when I identified with that and I was reborn, right? And I received this inheritance. Well, sort of. I got signed up for this inheritance that is kept in heaven, right?
Yeah.
And is on, so that's when I got saved. And like, well, when will you when will you receive your salvation inheritance? Well, like in the last time, like when Christ returns and the inheritance is dispersed among the children. Like, so when were we saved? Man, what verse are you talking about?
Right. Yeah.
When people ask me, the question like, is baptism required for salvation? I'm like, sure. It's just like belief and repentance and like a life of discipleship. Like that's like, what are we talking about here? And it's not just they like this like punctiliar one point in time, and the Bible really doesn't look at it in that way.
Yeah. Well, in a sense, we have been saved because by listening to God, like God just wants people who pay attention. Like the world is just disregarding him. It's like, will anybody listen to me? And when we choose, okay, God, I'm going to listen to you. You created it all. I want to know what your plan is. And when we realize that the apex of his revelation is in the form of his son who taught us and then who lived a life as an example, by listening to God and listening to Jesus and saying, I'm going to try to model my life after that, that's a salvation event. Like I've been transferred out of the darkness into the light. I'm like, you think you're so wise, but you're so stupid doing these things. Just listen to God and the Creator. Of course, that's salvation. And so I feel like, as we try to live out lives of that, we're walking in salvation. But at the same time, I realize that if that's all our salvation is, if our salvation is just for this lifetime, we're to be pitied above all men, that there's still something where God's like, you're still trying to be light in a broken world. And there's an apex to this that I want to experience so bad that it keeps me coming back to God to listen and at times to repent when I know that I've, botched the job.
Yeah, I think it's relevant to just always remember, like, there are multiple answers to the question, what saves us? And later in 1 Peter, it's our baptism saves us. And elsewhere, the birth of Jesus saves us, right? His name means God saves his people from his sins. God's election to save the world through Jesus saves us. The calling of Abraham, saves us. The death of Jesus, the resurrection of Jesus, the ascension of Jesus, it all saves us.
Yeah.
And so that, the question of what saves us is a broad one biblically, because there's a lot that God's doing that saves us. And yeah, baptism is one of the a lot. So as one of the a lot, it shouldn't be neglected.
Agreed.
As neither of the other ones should be neglected.
Exactly.
But like you said, that I like the phrasing, like people want to reduce it to a punctiliar moment. Now, what is the thing that saves us? And the only answer to that is you shouldn't reduce it to the thing.
Yeah.
It's many things according to the scriptures.
Amen. Yeah. Agree. Yeah, we're all checking the clock. We got time. We still have time.
Hum along.
So transitioning into verse 6, I like, number one, he says, in this you rejoice. And I like that. I like the positive aspect there. Some people think that, to be religious is to be like a sourpuss or something like that. It's like, no, rejoicing is always a part of the message from God, that they're not just experiencing joy, but they're rejoicing. But that's in the midst of the next line, even if now for a little while you have to suffer various trials. And so, suffering that's why we've been saying he's got to talk about it, because he's going to say, on the one hand, you're going to rejoice. You should have joy, and I'm encouraging you to have joy. But it's got to be in the midst of a world that's that doesn't recognize God, that thinks that you're deviant, and they're going to punish you for it. They're wrong. We obviously think they're wrong. We believe they're wrong, but they're still going to try to make your life miserable. And so you just got to know that suffering is a part of the process.
Yeah, and we're getting close now to the specific situation of the audience. Like they're probably, looking to Peter and others saying, how should we process everything that's happened to us right now? We are suffering, and we need help processing this. And that is their situation. And everything up till this point in the letter has been saying that may be your specific situation today for a little while. Interpret this little while situation in light of your big picture salvation situation, right? The big picture of God having foreknown that he would save his elect, right? Who through faith in Jesus, right, embrace this new birth. Like your situation now should be interpreted in your salvation situation that has deep roots in the foreknowledge of God, in the resurrection of Jesus, in your new birth into a living hope that cannot be faded. That's the context for processing this particular situation.
Yeah. Well, and I think the nature of their suffering is worth talking about, because I think people, when they think of suffering, they assume it's you're being arrested, thrown in jail, being killed. And that certainly did happen. We have plenty of evidence that people did experience that. But that was more the exception than the rule. The vast majority of Christians didn't get thrown in jail because they proclaimed Jesus or get killed or whatever, beaten up in the streets. But there were other forms of suffering that were still really difficult to deal with, being socially ostracized in your own town, which means, people aren't talking to you on the street. They're not coming into your shop to buy things, or they're not hiring you or whatever. And I love talking about this in class, because one of the hardest things to do as a person is to look at like your wife or your kids or whatever, your husband, and say, we're not going to eat today because we follow Jesus. That's a legitimate form of suffering that to this very day in places in the world people experience. And the temptation is, I got to feed my kids. I got to feed my family. I got to, pay my mortgage or whatever. I've got to compromise because I can't have my kids coming up to me and saying, Dad, I'm hungry, and I can't give them anything. That's like one of the hardest things. And so when we read about suffering, we shouldn't just limit ourselves to think being arrested, thrown in jail, or killed. But there's a daily form of suffering that I think people experienced to a far greater degree. And the question is it worth it? And can you actually find joy? Can you say, I don't like feeling this way, but there is a joy that I am anticipating both now and in the future that makes this all worthwhile?
Yeah. Yeah, there's nothing in this letter that's talking about a Nero-like persecution.
Right, yeah.
And if we try to identify the persecution, and we're getting contextual clues from the letter, he talks about living in reverent fear later in chapter 2 in your time of exile. And it's in reference to the emperor, in relationship to the governing authorities, in relation to harsh masters, in relation to unbelieving spouses. Like their suffering seems to be caused from their exilic status, that they no longer have the same standing they used to have before their rebirth, their new birth from above. Because now they're a believer and they find themselves and their lives intertwined with all sorts of unbelievers who don't respect their faith at all, and may even view them with hostility and causing some kind of persecution.
Yeah, I think that one of the hardest things is to feel isolated in a crowd, and you're surrounded by people, and some of them are your friends, or at least used to be, or family members, who are, like you said, they're hostile to you, and their goal is to get you back on track. Chances are they're looking at you as compromising, the prosperity of the town. Like, we worship these gods, they take care of us, they give us prosperity and help us to have victory over our enemies, and you're undermining that. And, this god or goddess can look down at us and say, oh, you've got this deviant over here, you better take care of it or I'm not going to help you out. And so they're trying to get him back on track. The goal is start going to the temples and set up little idols in your shop or whatever. And when people refuse to do that, that ratchets up that hostility. It's a very sort of complex situation of social and economic networks that create a kind of suffering that has nothing to do with being beaten up or thrown in jail. And I say that because nowadays Christians can experience that. Even though we live in a nation that's more, amenable to being as Christians, it doesn't mean that in your neighborhood or your family, you're not going to encounter people who are going to be hostile to you and actually bring suffering on you because of your commitment to Jesus.
Yeah, so I'm looking at trying to wrap up this verse here as the time goes.
I know, we're out of time.
So we rejoice, even if for a little while we've had to suffer, so that the genuineness of our faith, pause past the parenthetical phrase, may be found to result in praise and glory and honor when Jesus Christ is revealed. So this suffering is going to refine us, right? It is going to strengthen us. And the outcome of this will be our praise, our honor, our glory when Christ returns. and I think that's key. Like there's no promise that you're standing true, standing faithful, sticking to the gospel, clinging to your imperishable hope. There is no promise that you're going to receive a lick of praise, honor, or glory before Christ returns. And you have to trust that reward that's being kept safe for you, there is a day when it will be received, when Christ is revealed. And Christ, of course, has already been revealed to us who by faith behold him and receive him. But the full inheritance hasn't been revealed to the world. And when Christ is revealed to the world, then we will be revealed as his children. And that's when our vindication will be complete.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Like so much we want, like the kudos. Like, aren't I being good, God? Like, and like you're not going to get that. The world's not going to give that to you. So you just got to hold on. You will receive that, but it's not going to be anytime soon, and not until Jesus comes back in his fullness, right? And so I think it's a challenging word, right? For those of us all of us who are kind of selfish and want those things. And Peter's like, yeah, you have to wait for that. It's not happening anytime soon.
But I think it does challenge us to be communities where you have groups of people who all share that same commitment to say, whatever you don't get from the world, at least in this small group of people, if we're honoring God, you'll get the kind of honor that you should have gotten from the world. I think it places a lot of emphasis on that. We need to be the communities where the things the world denies us, we find. And we find it because of our shared commitment to Jesus.
Yeah. And it's not that the church is going to honor us every time something bad happens
Oh, no,
to
I'm not
us,
saying
but
that.
they will help us place into perspective what's going on now. They'll remind us that, no, our inheritance hasn't changed. Your situation does not compromise at all the reward that's coming. And, we remind you that it is coming and you can expect it. And let's keep encouraging each other until that day happens.
Yeah. Looks like we're out of time for today. Thanks so much for joining us in this week's episode of the After Class Podcast. After Class because
the best conversations happen
after class.
Thank you again for listening to this episode of the After Class Podcast. ACP is hosted by Sam Long, John Nugent, and Ron Peters. Social media pictures and descriptions are provided by Darren Harris. Audio mixing and editing is done by Drew Nyquist. If you've enjoyed this episode of ACP, you might also enjoy GLCC's Master of Arts in Practical Theology degree. In this 36-hour program, you will receive first-rate biblical and theological instruction from John, Ron, Sam, and several of their colleagues at Great Lakes Christian College. To learn more about this program, visit glcc.edu. Get practical and go deep at GLCC.